I'm so excited to talk about one of my favorite games of all time, a game that's a masterpiece, considered a classic by many, Shadow of the Colossus. I recently completed the remake, the PS4 version on PS5, and it was such a wonderful experience. I've completed Shadow of the Colossus at least 10 times at this point, and I was still at awe of everything I was doing in that game. So I'm so excited to talk about Shadow of the Colossus. Today we're going to talk about the legacy of Shadow of the Colossus, why it's such a masterpiece, and the influences it's had on the video game industry. So this will be a deep dive into every detail of Shadow of the Colossus, including its gameplay, graphics and sound, its legacy, and of course the story. So spoiler warning ahead, if you haven't completed Shadow of the Colossus, stop here. If you're still with me, make sure you hold on, grab your favorite snack, grab your favorite drink, and make sure your stamina bars are recharged for a deep dive into one of the most epic video games of all time. Since this game came out in October 18th of 2005, nothing has quite come out, even in 2024, since the release of Shadow of the Colossus that's like it. Now, there have been games that replicate elements of it, epic boss battles, the isolative environment and world, but there's nothing quite like Shadow of the Colossus. What makes Shadow of the Colossus so unique is that there's only 16 boss battles, the 16 colossi that you fight and you travel to in this world. There's nothing else in between your original start point and these boss fights, which is very unique because at the time you used to have all this filler where you fight random enemies, get experience points, right? Get items. Here, there's none of that. And the other thing that sets the gameplay of Shadow of the Colossus apart, especially back in 2005, now this is the era of quick time events. So you would have epic boss battles. I start thinking of God of War, games like that, where you really weren't doing the actions of climbing these epic beasts or monsters or whatever. Shadow of the Colossus, it's you doing everything that you see on the screen. You're climbing, you're platforming, you're holding on to dear life. It's all you. So really, that's the bread and butter of Shadow of the Colossus, is you're running around, jumping on these colossi, holding on for dear life, watching your stamina gauge, watching your health. But something very important to note is that it's not just a big old boss fight where you just climb them the same every time and just stab them as much as you can. No. These colossi, you have to look at them as puzzle fights, as puzzle battles. They're all big puzzles, and they're all different as to how you're going to get on them, where their weak points are at, and how you have to use the environment, and of course, your trusty steed, Argo. So the horse, Argo, is another big piece of the gameplay, and some of these colossi will require you to use him, make sure you're running away from attacks, using his speed to climb on them, and running away from them at the same time. So the 16 colossi for the most part are pretty great. I would argue that maybe 2 or 3 of them weren't at the quality of the other ones, but I would say that even the worst ones bring something fresh to the table in terms of different gameplay or puzzle mechanics. And like I said earlier, a lot of games have been inspired by Shadow of the Colossus. The concept of multi-stage, climbing a huge beast or boss, games like God of War 3, Azura's Wrath, Bayonetta, that have taken it to another level. But again, Shadow of the Colossus, what made it unique is that you're doing every action that you see. But back to the core gameplay of Shadow, and yes, aside from the 16 colossi that you face, there's no other side quests, no other objectives, no quest logs, no crazy map to do a bunch of collectibles. That's it. There are some little extra stuff you can do, like find these little lizards on these temples that give you more stamina or some fruit, but that's about it. And the crazy thing about Shadow of the Colossus, and I don't get this from a lot of games, is I would still want to explore areas, even though I didn't think there was something there, just to get a sight of the vistas and explore. It led me to just the beauty of the game and the isolation. I just wanted to see what was around the corner, even though, hey, the game's not telling me to do it, I still wanted to. And this brings me to the concept of Shadow and its idea of less is more. The gameplay, the game in general, is just very minimalistic. It only has what it needs to have. And back then, and even now, It is so refreshing to get that, to not have this filler, to just have the pure goodness the whole way through. And I think that's still something that games need to look back and be like, okay, this is what we need to be doing. And I can see someone trying to make the point that, hey, well, maybe this lack of enemies and things to do is due to the hardware limitations of the PS2 at the time. And my rebuttal to that is this, that when you play Shadow of the Colossus, you can tell all this is very intentional. That opportunity of reflection when you go from the starting point of the temple to the next Colossus, that is very intentional. The way you feel after you take down another beast, that sense of remorse, you can tell that that's also what you're meant to feel. And the crazy thing is they pulled this off without telling you. There's no text. There's nothing that, wow, you should feel sad right now. It's based off the music and the gameplay. To cap off our discussion of the gameplay in Shadow of the Colossus, all I want to say is this, is the gameplay in this game is so unique. The sense of scale, of height, of epic proportions, it's something that's been replicated in other games, of course, but the package that Shadow of the Colossus has not been replicated. And to think that this game came out in 2005 on the PS2, and then you can go back right now, play it on the PS2 or play the remake, it doesn't matter, and to still be able to get that sense of scale and wonder and incredible gameplay, it's truly incredible, and it's something that every gamer has to experience, in my opinion. And as brilliant and as amazing as the gameplay of Shadow of the Colossus is, I think even better is the story of Shadow of the Colossus. It's simple yet complex, emotional and yet open to interpretation. But before we get into all the details and the themes, let's talk about the setup. So our story starts with our main character, Wander, traveling on his horse, Agro, carrying a girl's dead body. And we learn that this girl was sacrificed by their tribe, their people, because they believe she has a cursed future. So we get to this forbidden land, and he sets her down on this stone pedestal, and we hear a voice. As we start talking to this deity, this presence that we learn their name is Dorman, we learn that Wander is here to try to bring this girl back to life, and that he heard that in this forbidden land that is possible, that the dead can come back to life. And Dorman says, yes, we are capable of doing that, especially because you possess the ancient sword that Wander stole from his people, his tribe as well. And so Dorman says, okay, with the sword, if you can kill the 16 colossi in this forbidden land, you will destroy the idols connected to them in this temple, and then they can bring her back to life. There are two important things to note here. And number one is that Dorman has this malicious vibe to him, right? And number two is that he warns Wander that doing this, there will be consequences. And Wander says, I don't care. So as soon as you talk to Dorman, you instantly are off to the races. You leave the temple and you go search for your first Colossus. And what's interesting is when you approach this first Colossus, there isn't much of a feeling of a threat. Obviously, huge beast and all that, but it's kind of just walking around chilling. And not till you kind of instigate a little bit does it start to get a little bit aggressive. And that's a theme that you'll see with a lot of these, is a lot of them don't really try to attack you until you start attacking them. But when you take down your first Colossus, you'll see this kind of shadowy substance in like a tendril form come out and chase you. I mean, you can't run away from it. You can try, but eventually it will get you. And it'll knock you out, go inside your body, and then you end up waking up at the temple to do this all over again and go find the next Colossus to take down. And what's interesting about this is as you take down more Colossi, right, Wander's appearance gets darker, more shadowy, and he starts to change. Obviously, whatever is in these Colossus is going into our main character and changing him. Now, I want to reiterate that Shadow of the Colossus is very open to interpretation. A lot of it's not spelled out for us, and so we kind of just have to piece things together. And I've seen other videos and seen other people's theories, and really the main thing of what's happening here is that we are essentially getting Dorman out of whatever prison he is in. And this forbidden land is forbidden because they don't want Dorman to get out. And what's interesting about this forbidden land is that as you explore and take down Colossus, you'll see that there was obviously civilization here. Not no more. There's no more people that you see, except for your tribe that is looking to come to the forbidden land to stop you, but we'll get into that in a bit. But again, what we're doing is getting Dorman out of his prison, and we're doing that by killing these 16 Colossi. Seeing this would likely make someone believe that Dorman is evil. And while, yes, I do believe that Dorman is more malicious than good, I don't necessarily think that it's so black and white. Yeah, I am on the side that sure, he's more evil than good for sure. But also, I think it's deeper than that. And what I mean by that is what we're doing here, right? We are killing these beasts because we're grieving over someone we want to come back to life. Now, in every ethical conversation you'll ever have about stuff like this is that, well, bringing back the dead isn't necessarily an ethical thing. And especially killing these beasts, to do so, it's a very selfish proposition. And so, yeah, that's where I feel like that remorse is coming from, because you're killing these beasts for your personal reasons. And in the beginning, you don't have an indication that Dorman is evil. You wouldn't know all this information, right? So that's where I think the game is so brilliant, is that you start reflecting on these things, and obviously you're going to go through with it, right? It's a video game, right? That's what you're supposed to do. But that's another very interesting aspect of Shadow of the Colossus. And this concept of questioning the player and what they're doing, it was something that was very fresh and new to me at the time. I was 14, 15, and I never really had a game that made me question what I was doing as much as Shadow of the Colossus at the time. Like, why am I just doing it because the game is telling me to do it? Is this the right thing to do? And this theme has been tackled pretty thoroughly now. Games like BioShock and The Last of Us come to mind when I think of this, but Shadow of the Colossus did it in such a brilliant way, and in a way where you question, well, yeah, maybe it's not the right thing to do, but it's not all black and white. And, well, Wander's going to bring back the love of his life, like you said, no matter what. And in the end, I would say that Wander is justified in doing this, in trying to bring her back to life. And the only reason I say that is because the way she was taken away from him. If she died from natural causes or whatever, then, oof, Wander, come on, just let it go, buddy. But in this case, she was ritually sacrificed. Well, I can't say she was ritually sacrificed. I don't know that, but she was sacrificed. And so in that scenario, if I was Wander, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to try to bring this person back to life. Now, as soon as I saw that I had to scale a mountain, climb a 5 to 6 story beast, and kill him, you know, I would have been like, hey, you know what? Sorry, you had a good run, but I'm going to leave the Forbidden Lands. I'm scared of heights. And that's what's so impressive about Wander is, you know, obviously he's skilled with horseback riding and shooting a bow, but other than that, he's kind of a regular dude. Which leads me to the heaviest theme and the main theme, in my opinion, of Shadow of the Colossus, and that is dealing with grief. And that's something that every human will go through in life, right? Be it a family member, a loved one, a pet, something that I recently went through. And dealing with grief is a monumental thing, right? It does feel like you're having to conquer these beasts, these demons, to get over your feelings of guilt and sadness. So Shadow of the Colossus in that respect is also a piece of art, and the way that it hits in the human experience and the ability to conjure up those feelings. It's something that I think most people can relate to. So what happens in the end of Shadow of the Colossus? Well, before we get to the very ending, as you approach the 16th Colossus, the final step in your journey, this happens.
Agro!
It's a moment that hits me so hard, and I just beat this game a few days ago for like the 10th time combined between the remake and the PS2 version. And the reason why it's such a hard-hitting moment is because Agro is your one companion that you have in this empty world, this forbidden land. He's the one friend that you have, and for him to die at the very end, it's something that hit me so hard even 10 times later. So we defeat the 16th Colossi. We end up back at the temple. We're passed out on the floor. We look dead. And we see that our people, our group, our tribe has made it to the Forbidden Land and is there to stop us. Now, as they see us, we start to get up and our appearance has changed, right? We're darker. The shadowy substance has consumed us. We have horns now, and they claim that what we've done is pure heresy. We're an abomination. So they attempt to kill us. They shoot us with arrows, stab us with the sword, and as they do that, all those shadowy substance that was in us from the Colossi starts to come out, and we actually become this beast ourselves, where this is where Dorman is awakened, and we actually get to control Dorman and try to kill these people. As you attempt to kill these people, some of them make it out along with the tribe leader too, and apparently the last resort to stop Dorman's resurrection is to throw the sacred sword of light into the pond at the bottom of the temple to stop his resurrection. And so they do so, and Dorman is consumed by this pool, and the last remnants of Wander appears, and we get to control that as well. And we're being sucked into this pool, and no matter what you do, eventually you're going to lose. But as you go in there, apparently, we're dead. After this happens, we see that the bridge to get to the Forbidden Lands is completely destroyed, so there's no more access to this area. And so they assume that everything that's here is stuck here and it's over. Then, boom, the game cuts over to the love of her life laying on that stone pedestal, and she awakens. And even better than that is that as she awakens, guess who comes back? Of course, our trusty steed, Agro's not dead. So now it's Mono, the girl we resurrected, the love of our life, that's her actual name, and our horse. And they're all alone in the Forbidden Lands, or so we think. So now, as they get up, they approach the pool where Dorman was sucked into and Wander as well. And now, in there is a baby with horns. Now, who this baby is, if you haven't played the other games created by Team Ico, you would have no idea. But what it seems like, and what most people theorize, is that this child is Wander reborn. Now, the horns indicate that he likely has Dorman's presence in him, his soul, or whatever of remains of Dorman are in Wander in this new baby form. And so, what people theorize is that Mono eventually ends up becoming this cursed being that her tribe and people were afraid of. So in a paradox form, by them sacrificing her, leading Wander to doing all these things, killing the Colossi, bringing her back to life, him becoming a form of Dorman, it actually ends up making the future happen that they were so afraid of. Now, before we cap off our conversation about the story, I want to say two things. I haven't completed Ico or The Last Guardian. I have both, and I plan to complete both, but I haven't yet. And number two is I wanted to bring up Dorman one last time, and how interesting it is that they kept their end of the bargain, right? We did our part. We took down the 16 Colossi, but Dorman ended up bringing back Mono back to life, which they really didn't need to. They could have just used us and not kept their end of the bargain, but they did, which I think is so interesting because Dorman, again, does seem malicious and evil just in appearance and the vibe that they give. But this is why I kept bringing up that concept of black and white. And it's not all just pure good and evil, right? One can argue that what Dorman did might be a good thing, or it could be that the foundation of it ethically is just wrong. But again, up to our interpretation and how you feel about it. But I love that aspect of the story as well. But enough about the story. Let's finish off our video by going over the graphics and sound, and also the differences between the remake and the original PS2 version. In case you haven't noticed, the visuals, the sound, the music of Shadow of the Colossus is top notch in every respect, from the PS2 version even to the remake. The fidelity of the graphics is one thing, but really the art direction of Shadow of the Colossus is why it's so amazing to look at. And even with the PS2 version, which really was ahead of its time for that console, that's where Shadow of the Colossus is so timeless. It's every angle, every view that you get while you're traveling around on top of a Colossus, it's all beautiful. And one thing I will say though is the camera angles can be kind of rough at times, especially when things are moving around, flipping around when you're holding onto a Colossus. But those moments are rare and doesn't get in the way of the gameplay that often. And I mentioned this earlier, but I'd catch myself just kind of wandering off the trail, going random places just because I wanted to see what's around this corner, what's on top of this mountain, what's over this cliff, just because I wanted to catch sight of the views. I didn't think there would be anything there of use to me in the game. I just wanted to experience that and see what's around the corner. And as beautiful and as wonderful that the graphics and art direction are in Shadow of the Colossus, I think even better is the sound direction in this game. From the music that plays when you're on top of a Colossus, to those epic notes, to the more somber notes. It's all beautiful, and this soundtrack I think is one of the best soundtracks in any piece of media ever. Video games, TV shows, movies, I don't care. I think Shadow of the Colossus is up there with the best of them. Now, finally, to wrap up our overview of Shadow of the Colossus, I wanted to go over the remake versus the PS2 version. And every time there's a situation like this, it always seems like people are like, oh, the original's better. You know, you got to be faithful to the original version and all that. And I usually understand that. And I think the original is amazing. And I would play that right now. I just beat the remake. And I have to say, the remake is just way superior in every respect. Now, where it gets a little controversial is that people think that the remake is a little bit brighter, more lush, isn't 100% faithful to the original. And yeah, that is true. It does look a little bit brighter, a little bit different, a little more light, but it just looks so much better. And I think it's still faithful enough to the original that it doesn't really affect me negatively in that way. I don't think that the PS2 version is superior. I do think the remake is superior, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, the original came out on the PS2 in 2005, right? While the remake came out in February of 2018. So you have a 13-year difference, and it's not like we're bashing the original by saying the remake is better. I would say if you're going to play this game, not only because of the difficulty of getting a PS2 and the PS2 version, I would still recommend you play the remake. Due to the graphics, due to the updated controls, it's just a little bit smoother, easier on the eyes, and it's the same experience you would have in the original, the same emotions, the same gameplay. So without a doubt, the remake I think is a superior version, and congrats to Bluepoint on just killing it with all these remakes. I played the Demon's Souls remake on PS5, and then I played this, and they're just the best at making sure that they keep the soul and the spirit of the original games alive. So with that being said, that wraps up our overview of Shadow of the Colossus and why it's considered a classic by so many gamers and why it's so important to the gaming industry. I hope that if you've beaten this game before, that you appreciated looking back and reflecting on one of the best games I hope you ever played. And if you haven't beaten Shadow of the Colossus, I hope that you get the opportunity to do so and experience one of the best games you could ever play. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.